So after watching the movies in this box set for probably the 400,000th time, I decided I'm going to tackle my all-time favorite movie from the Universal Classic Monsters set, Frankenstein, 1931. The film stars Colin Clive, Mae Clarke, Edward Van Sloan, Marilyn Harris, and of course, Boris Karloff as the monster. In all honesty, it was very difficult to come up with a decision on which film in particular I was going to review, because in this box set, there's also The Invisible Man. Frankenstein 1931 and The Invisible Man 1933 are two of my all-time favorite horror films out of the Universal Monsters set. Maybe one day I'll get around to doing Invisible Man, but for now, Frankenstein 1931. The film tells the story of a young scientist desperate to create life. After his goal is a success, he soon realizes there are abnormalities with the monster. The film opens with a prologue by Edward Van Sloan as a warning to the Depression-era audience that it's perfectly understandable to leave the theater if they believe that the film might be too scary for them. Afterwards, the film opens officially in a graveyard as a funeral is taking place. As the body is soon lowered into the ground and buried, we meet our first two characters in the film, Henry Frankenstein and the hunchback Igor character of Fritz. They are seen digging up the body, and it's soon revealed that they are collecting bodies for a sinister experiment. But only one thing is wrong. Henry Frankenstein doesn't have access to a good brain. We then meet Dr. Waldman, portrayed by Edward Van Sloan. He is giving a lecture on the differences between a normal brain and the abnormal brain of a serial killer. After the class is over, Fritz sneaks into the window and tries to steal the good brain, but a loud noise causes him to drop the brain and damage it, prompting him to have no choice but to take the abnormal brain. We then meet Elizabeth, the fiancée of Henry Frankenstein, portrayed by Mae Clarke. She looks to be distraught and worried based on the circumstances surrounding her fiancé. After paying the Baron a visit, Henry Frankenstein's father, and meeting up with Dr. Waldman, they all decide to go find Henry and bring him home. Upon finding Henry, and after his initial attempts to shoo them away fails, they are invited in, and soon they will see the culmination of all of his hard work. After learning from Dr. Waldman that the brain inside of the monster is a serial killer's, we finally get to see the reveal of the monster, portrayed by Boris Karloff. However, Frankenstein's celebration over his creation is short-lived after Fritz enters the room and begins chasing the monster with a flaming torch. This would lead to Fritz's untimely demise. And after hearing his screams, Frankenstein and Waldman find the body, and Waldman finally convinces Frankenstein that he needs to kill his creation. They concoct a plan to knock out the monster just long enough for Dr. Waldman to dissect and kill him. Although successfully knocking out the monster, the plan fails when the monster reawakens on the surgery table. He then kills Dr. Waldman and escapes. He soon comes across a small girl. However, he is gentle and kind with the girl, as she is not hostile towards him as opposed to the character Fritz. After playing games together down by a lake, this magical scene soon takes a very dark turn. After the little girl shows the monster a game where she throws flowers into a lake and watches them float, the monster grabs the girl and throws her in the lake, believing she will float. When she doesn't re-emerge, he flees in a panic. It's now the wedding day of Henry Frankenstein and Elizabeth. Unfortunately, the body of the child is found, and Elizabeth is found unconscious but not harmed after a run-in with the monster. Later in the evening, a mob is set up by Henry Frankenstein to hunt down the monster. The manhunt comes to an end at an old windmill, and after it is set afire, and Henry Frankenstein himself is thrown from the top of the structure by the monster, the windmill collapses and the monster is believed to have perished in the flames. The film ends with Henry Frankenstein in bed resting, and all seems to be back to normal. Overall, I believe that this film is very damn near perfect. I mean, the acting in this movie, compared to how acting in film is nowadays, is a little hokey and a little dated. But you also have to remember that these films, when they were first released, sound films, especially talkies, were still very, very fresh and new. They were maybe at the most 3 to 4 years old. Before then, all you had was silent films where you didn't have to worry about acting as much. I mean, don't get me wrong, you still had to be able to act to an extent. But it wasn't so much so that you needed to cry real tears and all of this other stuff to get the point across. Also, some of the actors in this film are very, very good and very memorable, especially Colin Clive, who plays the role of Henry Frankenstein, which is the role he is probably arguably most known for now. He does a really good job of portraying a scientist on the brink of insanity because of his ambitions. Edward Van Sloan, of course, if you love these movies, then of course you know Van Helsing from Dracula, from the 1931 film Dracula. Edward Van Sloan was a really good addition to this movie as well. He's basically the exact same character, just with a different title and name. But he still brings a pretty good amount of energy to this film, a pretty good amount of style to the film, in my opinion. I don't really know much about Mae Clark, except for this movie, but once again, I still think really good overall. And another person I forgot to mention, Dwight Frye, who also, if you know the 1931 film Dracula with Bela Lugosi, plays Renfield. But in this film, Frankenstein plays the character of Fritz. I thought he was really, really good too. I really enjoyed his performance as just the very brutal and very mean Igor character. And the scenes where he's torturing the monster, you really feel for the monster in those scenes, and you're actually glad. You're not so much shocked as you are actually glad that the monster finally retaliates and puts a stop to him. What else can be said about this movie other than it's really good? It's a classic, and it helped launch the career of one of the biggest actors in Hollywood at the time, and one of the biggest actors in history, Boris Karloff. It's funny to think without Boris Karloff in this role that there would soon probably be no thriller anthology series. The Raven probably wouldn't have been as successful as it was had Boris Karloff not been cast in the film. The same thing with the Comedy of Terrors. The Black Cat wouldn't have been as memorable as it is if it didn't have the familiar faces of Boris Karloff in it, along with Bela Lugosi. The old dark house wouldn't have been as memorable. So yeah, it's a good thing that Boris Karloff was put in this film. Also, this is my opinion, but ever since the original Frankenstein film, no other actor has been able to portray the monster as good as Karloff. He just seemed to know exactly what to do in order to make a movie work. And that's why he is honestly my all-time favorite actor in all movies. I don't know if it was on instinct or what, but you can't argue with the facts that he is the most iconic movie monster of all time. If you ever mention the word Frankenstein or Frankenstein's monster, the very, very first image that comes to mind is this one. So this has been my review of Frankenstein 1931. I'm Marty Mayhem, and this has been my review. If you like the video, please subscribe and hit the notification button for my next upload.